Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. I was trying to get the audio together. You know, the multitasking sometimes is a strength of mine. Today it might not be that, but I think I made it work.
You're a man of many talents, Lamont.
Right. Let's see. Yes. It's
So
good to see you all.
So I was gonna say I saw you guys at Joining Hearts.
Yeah, our hearts were joined.
Josh, was that your first Joining Hearts?
No, I've been several times. Me and Lamont actually went last year and had a good time. Yeah.
And Aaron, was that your first?
It was my first. It was an experience.
Do tell, because you were out of the our four, you were dressed probably, and my husband, I'll say, dressed the most, like had least amount of clothing on. I'll say that. Yes, least amount of clothing.
Wow. As conservative as I am right now. No.
Buttoned up now.
We had a good time. It was fun. I didn't eat anything, so I don't know if anybody else had the chance to eat. We drank our dinner. So.
We ate in VIP.
I ate. I actually went back for more. I like to eat.
Aaron, it was so lovely, and you, Lamont, too, meeting your all's partners. And Aaron, your partner, actually came up to me and was saying how much he enjoys watching the podcast. And so it's good to hear, listeners and viewers' feedback. Because, we're just talking. This is a real conversation we're having between real people, real friends.
Yeah.
And so, it's good to hear that.
Yeah, likewise. I think that it was fun, seeing you guys in your elements and just having some fun. And as Lamont mentioned, seeing you guys with less clothes on.
Seeing y'all skin.
So listen, if people don't know what Joining Hearts is a nonprofit, and they have a number of events throughout the year. And it's really like a fundraiser for organizations that focus on people living with HIV and AIDS. And they raise all this money and they give it to the organizations so that they can help people with like housing assistance, food, employment, you name it. So it's like a good way to have fun while giving some money to, a cause that is important to our community. Yeah.
It's been around for like 30 some years too. They've raised, they always put up the big grand total amount of dollars that they've raised. And it's, several $1 million that they raised over the years. So it's
awesome.
Yeah. For me, it's always been just a very friendly social environment. You kind of see people you haven't seen at other events throughout the year. So it's kind of like a little gay reunion. Yeah. At least that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, Jeremiah, it was so good seeing you and your partner as well.
Yeah, y'all were like the local celebrities. I tried to get to the bar with y'all to get a drink, and y'all got stopped 15. I was like, all right, y'all have that. I'll meet you.
I lived in Atlanta for 11 years, and just being in gay men's health, I feel like there's rarely a party or event I go to where I don't know anyone. So it's refreshing. It's great. I love running into patients. I love running into people I know, but also, sometimes I feel like I'm a politician, running for office. Hey, how are you? How are you? How are you? So
that's the way I feel when I'm with Josh. He knows everybody. I'm the little, the stepbrother.
Well, I will say, I guess it's a little different as a therapist running into my clients. I saw quite a few clients in that space, and sometimes I have to kind of follow their lead in terms of how they want to talk or not talk, or pretend like we don't know each other or whatever it is. So, anyway, yeah, it's a good time.
Well, tonight we're going to talk about religious trauma. So it's a very casual conversation. We're just real people sharing our experiences, and they're unique to us. And what I said earlier is sometimes our format is very unformatted in some ways. We're casual. It's like we're having a conversation. So I guess we'll just dive right in. So let's start with Josh. I want to ask you first on this, because you've shared some of your religious background already on previous podcasts. But can you share some of your own personal experiences with religion, and perhaps talk a little bit more how it impacted your journey as a gay man?
Yeah. Religion has been a pretty integral part of my entire life. I mean, I was born into the United Methodist Church. My grandparents were church members as well, and that's there's not a single part of my life that the United Methodist Church hasn't touched or been a part of or impacted in some kind of way. I'm ordained in the United Methodist tradition as well. I used to serve actually at St. Mark United Methodist Church, a big LGBT congregation here in Atlanta, for 17 years. So it's something that's important. And religious trauma is something that I specialize in my therapy practice because it is, I would say the Christian church, certainly in the United States, has been the source of a lot of the anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-queer rhetoric and actions. And so, but I grew up in a church that, homosexuality was viewed as inappropriate at best, but we didn't talk about it. And as I mentioned, I think in a previous podcast, that silence sends a message also, which I think I internalized quite a bit of shame around my own desire, my own sexuality, who I felt drawn to for romantic and sexual purposes. And so that was a large part of my coming out process was making peace with that and putting my name and gay in the same sentence and not freaking out about it and having to, reconcile, and also, reframing the word gay itself, as I mentioned. But aside from that, I mean, religion has been a pretty positive force in my life. We did a lot of volunteer work, service projects, really understanding poverty and trying to be, felt it was really important for us to stand up for and be in solidarity and service to those that are oppressed and marginalized, et cetera. So I think I really appreciate that formation that I had. And then, a lot of gay folks go to seminary, honestly, a lot of queer folks, trans folks as well, because I think for me, at least, it was, going back to the source, learning, a lot of this information for myself, going back and looking at the original languages that these texts were written in, seeing how translation, people who make translations have to make editorial decisions when they're moving a word from one language to another, because there isn't always a lateral sort of equal word. And so they have to kind of make a decision. So anyway, learning stuff like that. And it was just very liberating for me in a way that I've tried to parlay into my own ministry, my therapy practice, and just in my everyday life. So that's kind of a mixed bag, but overall a net gain, I would say.
I always find it intriguing when you talk about your journey in being clergy and your training, and because in my form of the way I grew up in religion, a gay man would never have any place in my church, right? It was very clear in the Pentecostal faith that there's no room for here at the table. So did other people grow up with maybe outside of, the Methodist church, for example? How did you guys grow up, you and Lamont and Aaron?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Baptist church, and as far as I can remember, we were literally always in church, like Monday through Friday. Let me not say Monday through Friday, but at least 2 to 3 days a week, we were at the church. And I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and our Black community is pretty small. Like everybody, there are like 3 questions we ask people: what's your last name? What high school did you go to? And what church did you go to? And if you ask those 3 questions, you can figure out who the person's cousin is and get all the gossip on them, right? And so that's just how it is. But like we were like so a part of our church. My parents both were deacons. My older sister was a minister at the church. One of my dad's aunts, she was a pastor at another church. Bunch of aunts and uncles who are pastors, right? So faith and religion were actually tied together for me. So there was no you couldn't have religion without a spiritual connection. So you had to go to church. You had to sing in a choir. I was a mime. Lord, today.
You were a praise dancer.
I was a praise dancer, a mimer. I taught Bible study. I did drill team. I was an usher. Listen, we were at the church all the time. It was so much that it's a part of your life in growing up, and being a gay man and hearing spiritual, like scriptures or people saying you're going to hell. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm connected to this amazing community, but this community thinks that I am sinful and shameful.
Yes.
So growing up with that, it was hard because, again, it's this love for this amazing, community. But then it's like, you all look at me a little differently. Like there were not like the preacher or our pastor did not speak from the pulpit and say, you are going to hell if you're gay. I don't think I ever heard him say that. But like as Josh mentioned, it was the silence. It was not standing up and saying, hey, people who are gay are affirmed here. Of course, if you were gay, you could not be a preacher. You couldn't hold leadership positions. However, there were tons of gay men in that church that you could clearly see. But it was just really like, sit down and be quiet. Like you literally had to just kind of be like in the shadows a little bit. Yeah.
Certainly hide that part of yourself for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, y'all, let's be real. Let's be 100 tonight. If it weren't for gay people, a lot of choirs would not exist. Let's be honest.
And pastors too.
Say it. Yeah, I grew up in the very similar to you, Lamont, in terms of this Black church that didn't say a whole bunch about gay folks. However, if they knew you were gay, obviously it was hell and brimstone and all of those things. So you had to you couldn't be overtly gay. You could be, you could date women, but you had to hide the fact that you liked men. Let's be honest. You couldn't wear overt things. You had to dress a certain way. And it's tough. It's really tough. Like, and I think of the Black church, I think of a body that is really focused on what we are necessarily, not what we are portraying, or supposed to portray, I should say, which is love and Christianity. We are actually portraying, I'll be honest, it's almost like this hypocritical oath of enslavement.
Really. Yeah. It's about like control.
Yes.
And if you don't subscribe to these set of norms, then you are a deviant, you are an abomination, and you are sinful. Like, those are the words I heard like over and over again.
So in my upbringing, we were non-denominational. Let me be clear, but I later learned we were pretty much Pentecostal. So, and the reason I make that distinction, non-denominational, I think has this sort of, when you think non-denominational, you think, well, they're pretty mild, or it's a mild form of a religion. But in fact, I think when I compare notes with other people, some of our beliefs were pretty extreme, and there were all the certain things that we did were speaking in tongues, and we did we'd say feet washing services, communion, those types of things. And my dad was the pastor for many years, so I think back, I don't remember any explicit messaging in the church by my father or other ministers, specifically about homosexuality. I do not remember that. I do remember at home and getting that message from my dad at home.
Yeah.
Being gay is wrong. You go to hell if you're gay. That's not a good lifestyle. So my messaging, even though it was based in my dad's religion, it was coming from him at home, not so much at church. Now, I have learned since I've moved away and my dad has passed, and there's another pastor of the church, he does, in fact, speak openly against homosexuality. And that was very hurtful, because I think you're hurting. It's enough to have all of the sort of implicit messaging and all of the secret, people talking behind your back. That's one thing, but to have like your pastor openly say you're going to hell because you're gay, that I think is very damaging, especially to children who are figuring out who they are.
Yeah. Do you know the famous singer Kim Burrell?
Of course.
Yeah.
So, recently I think she got an award at the what's the awards? She got it. Was it the Stellar Awards?
Either Stellar, yeah, I think it's Stellar Awards.
Stellar Awards. And then she, she's a big gospel singer. She apologized, half-ass, I'll say half-assed apology, to the LGBTQ plus community. She has said some really, really like hurtful and more just like, it was more than like her disagreeing. It was more like, it's disgusting, and like it is like she's here and the gays are down here, like that type of message. And I think it's, for me, like I feel like if you have religious beliefs and they're different than me, that is totally fine. My problem is when you're supposed to come from a place of love, and you say, if you don't agree with me, there's something wrong with you. You're shameful. You're less than a person. You're like, you have no value. And that's the messages that she was kind of giving to people. I'm not sure how you experienced that, Aaron, when you heard that. Yeah.
Exactly the same. And you know what I think about Lamont, and you guys forgive me for saying this. Honestly, it seems like it's very equivalent to slavery, in my opinion. It's very equivalent to slavery. In other words, there's a chosen people, and if you don't necessarily agree with the chosen people, then you're going to be banished to hell. And not only that, your life is going to be, not perfect, and it's not going to be fruitful or anything like that.
Yeah. Like you deserve turmoil. Like you deserve trouble and tribulation because you don't agree with this. Yeah.
So not to go way off topic, and I promise I'll bring it back, guys, but the Last Supper, the uproar among the Christian community about what they thought was the Last Supper at the Olympics opening ceremony. You guys are aware of this, right?
Yep.
Okay. So some of the circulating viral responses to that, one of them was basically saying, in Jesus's time, if this was the Last Supper, he was hanging around these horrible people, these homosexuals and these lepers. And it's like, I have a problem with that comparison just at the start of it, because you're basically implying because someone has a same-sex attraction or loves someone of the same sex, that they're in the same sort of category as all these other terrible people, So I've seen
as a murderer, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That argument kind of falls flat on its face, in my opinion. But I have even seen gay people sort of share it as, look. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I was going to say, what do you guys think about that? Gay people are sharing, that video or that response.
I think some people in our community are afraid to question God and to question the Bible. Like it is, we have been so conditioned in Christianity that the Bible is supposed to be taken at face value. You read the King James Version, that is, God's message from his mouth to your ears. And if you question that, you are like, what? And you all know, translation, context, the culture at the time, what was the author trying to, infer or try to persuade. There are also so many nuances of the Bible. So if you don't question that, then you're going to think you're the same thing as someone who's a murderer.
Yeah. And someone in the comments says, Jesus actually hung out with sinners in the Bible and showed them nothing but love. I get that. I think my problem with is when people are saying because you're homosexual, automatically you're a sinner. And I think I may be jumping ahead a little bit, right? Because I'm giving you guys a little bit of a hint of where I'm at with my own faith process, right? Yeah. And I reject that. I reject that just because I'm gay, I can't be loved by God, that I'm inherently a sinner. And I think a lot of those arguments are making that, whereas my process of accepting my own faith, my own spirituality, has been to sort of reject that and say, no, God loves me as much as he loves someone who is heterosexual. there's other deeds that, I will be judged on, for example. So
yeah. And Josh, I think you and I have talked about this in one conversation or another. Lamont, I'm sure you've heard this, I don't know what the hell to call it, this ideology that Jesus hates the sin but loves the sinner. Like, where the hell did that come from? Real talk. It has put me in a position to, and when I was growing up to think that because you were born this way, because you subscribe to a certain way of living, that you are a sinner, just solely by that.
I was going to say that phrase was co-opted by the religious right during the 80s, maybe late 70s and 80s, because MLK used that in nonviolent direct action, that we hate the sin of racism and discrimination and Jim Crow. We love the sinner, who is the person that is discriminating. We love that, so, but the damn religious right stole it and co-opted it and flipped it into something fucked up. And it's so offensive how some of this stuff, just like, people don't even know the origin of this stuff, and they just parrot things that they've heard from the pulpit or from whatever, it just, and that's why, and I think this is kind of a larger crisis that we're in our culture right now, is that people are ignorant and they don't take the time to learn and question things. I mean, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna get down off the pole, but Paul in the Bible, his entire ministry was based on his own personal experience that nobody else had. When he got struck down and blind on the road to Damascus, nobody else around him had that experience. He had it himself, and then spent the entire rest of his life processing that personal lived experience that he had. And yet so many of our churches try to beat our personal experience out of us and make us not believe our lying eyes with our own lived experience. So in the name of the Creator and the Christ.
I would say amen, brother. Amen over there. Like,
played on that one.
The Bible is really, it's a recount of people's experiences, and that's their experience, right? And I think people have taken it to make this organized religion based on shame, control, and trying to make people fit into something. And I don't love a God who shames me into loving him. I don't. Or makes me fearful, like a slave owner, like Aaron, like you said, to submit. And no, there's a different type of relationship. There's a different connection. That's based on love, acceptance. Of course, there's accountability. I'm not going to say you just do any and everything, but there's accountability in making sure that we are, kind to our neighbors, that we aren't harming people. But it's not based on, I have to be so fearful that I can't even ask a question.
Love can bring more people to Christ or Jesus or God than preaching ever could.
Yeah.
So I talked a little bit about how I've been able to reconcile my faith with my sexuality, and I can go further in that, but I'd like to hear from you guys, and let's start with you, Aaron. How do you feel like you've been able to sort of come to terms with your faith and the intersexuality of your sexuality? How's that work for you?
It's being authentic. It's so interesting that you had this this question, Jeremiah. I did was speaking at a church Saturday, actually, right before we came to Joining Hearts, and it's so interesting.
You wearing that white Speedo?
Right.
It's white snow.
I was dressed like an angel. I really was. So, kidding. But we were speaking on anxiety, we're speaking on depression and things of that nature. And so there was another guy that came up behind us, and he was speaking on, interestingly enough, abstinence. And then so he went down the road of abstinence, that's his opinion. I'm a sex therapist. Josh is a sex therapist. You guys, we deal with sex all the time. And no, not my belief, but whatever. So then he began to go off on a tangent regarding homosexuality, LGBTQ, and so on and so forth. And I legitimately got up and left, like within 5 minutes of the conversation. So I say that to say the authentic person that I am, that's within my journey, is really understanding that I don't allow that negative speech. I don't allow hate speech. I don't allow that as I'm walking towards the understanding of love, as opposed to the hate speech or the segregation, or as Lamont and I have been talking about, the slavery.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Lamont, do you have anything to add to that about, how you've been able to sort of come to terms with your faith and being a gay man?
Yeah, and it's so weird because I still, at the age of 43, I'm a church queen. Okay, if you want to put me in that box, I'm the one who, volunteers at church. Still at this age, because I feel like it's more of a cultural connection and a community that does good. Now I'm at an affirming church where I have a pastor that is a man married to another man. So it is very progressive in that. So the whole, community piece of, religion, I'm definitely connected to. When you talk about like reconciling my sexual orientation and my spiritual beliefs, that took a long time. It took a long time for me to even go to a gay church. I was like, oh my goodness, you're literally going to go to a gay church? Are you going to tell your parents? What are your siblings going to think about you? I had to push myself because I would go into spaces where people were wanting my talent, my money, and my time in their places of worship, but did not want me to show up as an authentic person and wanted to change me and say, hey, you're sinful. So I said, hey, no, God, there's something is wrong here. So, I had a lot of conversations, did my research. For people who are watching, do your own research. Like literally find some books, Google, figure out like why these statements were made in the Bible. I can tell you verbally, what I agree with, what I don't agree with. But if you don't invest the time and energy in doing the research and then having a conversation with your higher power, it's really not going to be impactful. It's just a debate. So that's what I had to do. I had to do my own research, have uncomfortable conversations with God. And now I'm in a place where I know God wants me to be married to a man. Like, he's like, it's not sinful. It's not wrong. This is who you're supposed to be attached to. And there should be no shame in it. There's no shame. Yeah.
Josh?
I think I'd just add that, I've felt close to, I'll call it the presence, God, just sort of that has never, ever been in question for me. It's always been somebody else trying to hijack that message and again, make me ignore my own lived experience and my own closeness with that presence. And I think it was pretty wounding to me when, some of the folks that mentored me, led me to believe that somehow I was, that my desire wasn't legitimate. The people, it was really painful. And it took some years, like Lamont said, to kind of work through that. And that's, I think, part of the reason I went to seminary was to explore that and to understand it for myself and to unpack and deconstruct some of the things that have been said. And I'm so glad that I did. And not that everybody has to go to seminary to do that, but that was a deep dive versus sort of a, just some research that anybody's able to do. I'm kind of a large part of my career has been helping others, get through that process. Because I myself have been through that. And I know, I can go toe to toe with anybody on scripture. I've read it cover to cover many times and studied it and led Bible studies and whatnot. And I've been on this lifelong crusade against what I call biblical fundamentalism. And that is what Lamont was saying earlier. If it says it right here in the King James English, then that means that's, and that is just not true. I mean, it's just factually not true.
Yeah.
What is true is that the texts were written in Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew, and that we don't even have copies of the originals, their translations. Now, that doesn't make it any less true to me, but seeing it through the lens of a different, just having a different narrative about what this means, that it's not a legal document. This is a historic document that talks about the journey of the divine with the people and their relationship with each other, the ongoing relationship that still is playing itself out today, according to my tradition. And that, anyway, so just learning all that stuff and thinking about it in a different way, so that we're not looking in some obscure, book in the Old Testament and saying, well, it says it right there. That means that doesn't make any sense. We got to understand the bigger picture of what all this is trying to tell us. So anyway, that was a long way.
So we're talking about trauma, and I think we can go dig a little deeper here and be a little bit more, for me, vulnerable. So and I actually, all three of you guys are still going to church. You're still believers, and I'm risking, offending people, I'm sure, by telling you how I truly feel. And it's only my journey, my own feelings. But I've gotten to a point where I've sort of rejected organized religion altogether. I reject Christianity. I reject organized religion of any form. I obviously believe Jesus was a person and on earth. And I look at things in a little bit more of a literal sense rather than the religious sense. And the way I've sort of come to terms with all of that is, for me, God is so complex. And God, what do you want to call it? The universe, the energy, whatever it is, I think it is thread through us as humans, right? There is this higher power, and I can't explain it. I don't think anyone could ever potentially try to explain it because it is so complex. So the way I've tried to come to terms with it is sort of set it over to the side and say, it's too much for me. I can't understand this. And I'm okay with that. I just know it's bigger than me. And I'm fine with leaving it right there. Now, part of that probably is because my religious upbringing was quite traumatic. I had an abusive father who was not only emotionally abusive in ways, but there was physical abuse. So for me, I resented not only him, but what he represented. In a lot of the ways, that was the church, because he was the pastor of the church. So I think for me, I think there's probably some things there that I've dug into, but not quite explored enough to figure out if I can have a full circle moment where I make it back and maybe come to church with you guys one day.
I respect that so much, Jeremiah. I respect what you're saying, your transparency, so much more than a Bible thumper who feels as though that he or she is, or they are omnipotent and they know everything about the way in which we should live our lives. So I respect what you're saying.
Yeah. I think it's a good place to be in, Jeremiah, because I think some people, they will lie to themselves and say, I have figured everything out about spirituality and religion. Like they say, I know it all, and I know that I know because I know that I know. I guess be like, oh, that's a mantra that you have been taught that has been so ingrained in you. And I think we're all going to be, until we die, evolving our spiritual beliefs. And I think, and people in here might, say I'm a little weird, but whatever it is, like, I'm not a person who goes to church every Sunday. Like, I'm not, like, it's not my ministry, right? I may go like every other month or every quarter, because it's just not. I grew up going every Sunday, and I'm more about having my connection one-on-one and making sure that I show up in the community. And I saw a lot of shit behind like that pulpit and the people who say they're leaders in ministry, right? And I can see it 10 miles away. Like, you can put me in any church. I can sit down and I say, oh, that person's sleeping with that one. That person's stealing the money. This one is like, so when I get around that, I'm just like, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. So I can, go to church when I want to go. So I don't get wrapped up into the mess of any church. And I'm okay with that. Yeah.
So one thing I'll say, and this is more of a question than a comment, but we talked about race on this podcast before. We've talked about the intersectionality of race and sexuality and also religion. But what I guess I've noticed in my own patient population, my Black patients, gay men, tend to have more of a relationship with the church as adults now, like you guys, than my white patients. I don't know if that's something that you could comment on or maybe give us a little insight. I know in the Black community, the church is so important. So maybe that's part of it. It's a rhetorical question, but feel free.
Yeah, I think from my experience, and I speak from my experience growing up in Pittsburgh, that was a place that we were able to connect, grow. There were youth centers that, provided social services, that had college prep classes. It was a part of like, you go to school, you go to after school, you go to church. It's a community, and that's why I said it's so hard sometimes to separate religion and spirituality, because sometimes for me, it was seen as both. Like there was no separation whatsoever. But as I get older, I can clearly say, no, I don't have to go there every Sunday to be connected to God. Yeah.
True. Our identity was in the church. That's where you had your friends. That's where, like Lamont mentioned, that's where you learned, certain things. There were, as Lamont mentioned, college prep, so on and so forth. So your entire identity was formed in the church. My mom, my dad had, friends that were through the church. We connected with, my brother and I connected with, their children and so on and so forth. So a huge part of our identity is in the church. So as we obviously go through this life, go through this journey, we tend to lean into what's comfortable for us. And for us, that part of our identity is very, very comfortable. Like Lamont said as well, when you're growing up, that is something that you're mandated to do. As you navigate this thing called spirituality, you begin to understand that some of the rules, the quote unquote rules that were put onto you, are not necessarily rules that were put on by God, but rules that were put on by folks, by people. And so you begin to create your own identity as well.
Yeah. And I will tell you, even to this day, my church, it's Mount Eric Baptist Church in Pittsburgh. They're my church family. I could go there this Sunday and probably say hello to 100 people that I would say are my family. And I haven't lived in Pittsburgh since 2000. 24 years. I haven't lived there, but I probably can go there this Sunday and say, hey, Deacon so-and-so, hey, Sister so-and-so. They're going to say, sit down, let me talk to you. Right. And it's a large, progressive Black church. They helped us to vote. I got scholarships to go to college from there. It's so much. Yeah.
Someone in the chat says here, for the Black community, the church was very important to have community and cope with social injustices. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
This makes me think of my partner who's not here with us, but he grew up Mormon and was very devout, served a mission for 2 years. And he shared a lot of his story with me of when he left the church, when he came out, the ostracization that was there, the feeling like you didn't have the community, because the Mormon church, they're very insulated in a way where, you date, if you're Mormon, you date someone who's Mormon, right? You hang out with your Mormon friends. You go to church with your Mormon, brothers and sisters. the same school. So it's all very integrated.
Mhm.
So for him, not only was it, he's sort of been kicked out of the church, all of a sudden, you don't have any real sense of community.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And I think that is the fear that keeps so many gay men, one, in the closet, are trapped in this belief that they are sinful as a gay man, because it means you have to now create an entire community of your own. Because now, mind you, my church I grew up in, they were progressive, so they weren't throwing the gays out. They weren't doing that. Now, if you went to my cousin's church, they were pulling you up to the altar, and everybody was going to pray on you, throw oil on you, and then if you didn't change, no, you couldn't come to that church. So it just really depends. Yeah.
I'm going to say something controversial, and I've said this for years, and you guys feel free to put me in my place here. But I think a lot of people who go to church and read the Bible, or maybe they don't, maybe they're loosely associated with Christianity, I feel like a lot of that bias, that prejudice there against gay people is not so much because of their religion, right? It's their own social bias. It's their own upbringing in their family, in their rural community, or, inner city community, maybe where they weren't exposed to gay people, right? And they use the scripture to sort of hide behind that, right? To say, well, it's wrong to be gay because the Bible says it right here. Whereas there's another one over here, scripture, that they completely, maybe the same person's having an affair on their husband or something, but it's, to me, a way for people to hide behind their own sort of prejudices.
I don't know. I think, and this is my opinion, I think so many years ago, white heterosexual land owning men reshaped this religion and ingrained it into the minds, the culture, the way we operate in society to control people who are not white heterosexual men who own land. I guess feel like it's meant to control women. They used it to control people of color, and then as time went on, people started to believe that and they subscribe to that.
What is our world if we're not oppressing anyone? Have we lived in a lifetime where we have not oppressed as a society in a world that we've not suppressed or oppressed rather anybody? No. Let's be real.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
So there's a gay author. He's Israeli. His last name is it's Yuval Harari, and he's written several books. Sapiens. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's one of his more popular ones. But he goes way back into sort of like the history of the world and civilizations. And one of the things he makes a point of that stood out to me, at least, was that religion was sort of formed when people started living in groups of 100 or more. That's when they felt the need to have a God. And that was mainly because, if you're in a group of 40, 50, 60, I have my eyes on you. You're not stealing my corn. I have my eyes on you, Josh. You're not sleeping with my wife, because we live in this little small village. But once you get this bigger group, sort of that breakdown of rules and the society, there's a breakdown, right, of trust. And so the theory that this author proposed was that there's two types of gods. This type of God initially was a punitive God, right? If you do something wrong, you're going to get in trouble. God is always watching, even if no one else is around. And then also in other cultures, there's the God of praise, right? Let's give our offerings to this God or gods, and pray for rain that we get for the the rainy season, or that we have a good harvest. It's just something I thought was sort of pertinent to the conversation, and the book is great if you haven't read it.
Well, I think it's the human journey of making meaning. I feel like, in my view, and I could be wrong about this, but in my view,
Hello.
Are we having technical difficulties, or am I?
I think I froze up
I
a
did
little
too.
bit.
Yeah. Okay.
We all did.
I'm looking at it on Instagram. Looks like we froze on Instagram as well.
Okay.
One of the things I was trying to say is that this, religion is a way of helping humans make meaning out of things in their lives, and that religion, I think, is organized around 3 questions: why are we here? What happens after we die? And what do we do with our pain and suffering and the pain and suffering in the world? How do we make sense of that? And, any world religion or spiritual tradition journeys with those questions. Maybe there's some other questions, but it feels like they all kind of come back to those. And I think those are important life questions for all of us to journey. And I think we all journey with it, whether we, however we make sense of that. Whether we, take and adopt what we hear from the pulpit or from our faith communities, or whether we strike out on our own and try to, make sense of it elsewhere. But I don't know if that resonates with you all, but that's just something I've thought about a lot, just, journeying with those questions, which are important questions.
Yeah. I think they're definitely important questions. And I'm comfortable with talking about race, and there are African religions, spiritual beliefs, pre-colonialism, our interaction with, people from Europe, transgender people, gay people were not thought of as sinful or shameful. Like they were actually thought as special, unique, and held certain spaces of privilege. So again, I think it is okay to grapple with questioning why people decided to say certain things were sinful or shameful. Like, why did they say that? Was it because they weren't into it, or was it that they wanted to control a certain society? Did they want to oppress women? Did they want to oppress people who didn't subscribe to certain gender norms? I ask those questions all the time, and I may have the right answers. I may not have those, and it's okay. Yeah.
It's I think honestly, it's because it's different. It's ignorance. I was listening to another podcast, and they were speaking about Dwayne Wade and his son, and how Dwayne Wade is actually, I don't know if you guys know this, he's actually launching a fingernail line in order to support daughter, excuse me, his daughter. And the podcast was going in, basically on Dwayne Wade, and saying that he's lost his masculinity. He's lost, his Hall of Fame status and so on and so forth, because of the fact that he is supporting his son or daughter. You guys forgive me for saying that, his daughter. And for me, it's the recognition that we don't like things that are different than what we are and who we are.
Yeah.
Well, but also I think and I know we've been having a little bit of technical problems. Welcome back, Jeremiah. Just the conceptualization of queerness over the hundreds of thousands of years has been done very differently in different cultures. Like even in the Bible, transgender people are in the Bible. They're called eunuchs in the Bible. That's in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now, they didn't understand that the concept that we have of transgenderism today is probably different than what they understood. But those folks had important roles in the court of the Pharaoh. The eunuchs were the lead ministers because they were, I think there was some castration, et cetera, involved. But that was to protect the bloodline of the king. And so those folks were lifted up intentionally and given, places of prominence. We've got, of course, somebody, I think in one of the chats talked about, two-spirited folks in a lot of the Native American traditions. That was a different way of understanding, some of what we, and those there are two-spirited people today, that identify that's a deep part of who they understand themselves to be. And many, many other ways of, and also I was listening to a lecture at Emory where they were talking about some cultures thought of both same-sex attracted people as well as transgender folks as a separate gender altogether. Like that there was more than just two, like that there was 3 or 4 genders, and that's how they understood and conceptualized that. So all this, and a lot of the rhetoric that we understand today has been invented within the last 50 years. You know, and people think that this is the way it's been spoken about since Jesus's time, and that is just not. That's just not the case.
Yeah.
No
So Jeremiah, we agree with you. Religion, spirituality is complex, and it's complex. It's like, so it's okay to, you know, wade through it. It's okay to experience times where you may not have the answer. That's okay.
By the way, there's a rolling storm that's coming through Atlanta right now, so I think that might be why we're experiencing.
This is the only time we've had problems like this.
You know, it's been the rainiest, the third rainiest summer in the history of Atlanta, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
So I guess, you know, we've kind of covered a lot that I wanted to get through tonight that we had talked about, you know, maybe discussing, but I think let's kind of end on a little bit of a positive note. Like, what steps do you think that we can take, even those of us in the community and those of us or those that are not in the community, to be more inclusive and offer, you know, affirming spaces for gay people?
Yeah.
So I will tell you one thing, and everybody doesn't have to do this. So again, I told you I'm, you know, the church queen, church kid. Like, so I still go to church, but I do go to affirming church. And part of my ministry that I work with is working with other affirming ministries and non-affirming ministries to deconstruct the Bible. Like, to literally, like, let's look at this passage. Let's look at the context. Let's look at the history, the author, and what kind of figure out like what they were intending to say, and why do we say being gay is an abomination? Like, what, like, you know, when you talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, I'll try not to start cussing. It wasn't about the gays. Y'all were okay with them raping the 2 male angels, but that was okay, right? That like, or the, you know, he was going to give his daughters up to be raped again. Like, that was okay. But when it comes to talk about, you know, being gay, it's like, oh God, no, don't do that. But rape is okay, right? So we have those conversations with different faith-based organizations to kind of like say, hey, if you continue to preach this message, let's think about what the consequences are. If you continue to preach hell, damnation, sin, how does that impact the lives of LGBTQ plus individuals? Is that bringing them closer to God, or is that pushing them away from the God that you say you love? Is that forcing them to develop negative coping skills? So I try to advocate. You can see I get on my soapbox when I talk about this. So I really try to advocate in that way to have those uncomfortable conversations with leaders, and particularly in different faith-based organizations.
Just from a marketing perspective, right? If you're trying to get these sinners into your church, telling them what terrible people they are, probably not a good approach, just from a marketing perspective.
Real talk.
Yeah, but the church has done a good job of shaming people into submitting to their version of Christianity and brainwashing them. They've done a great job of it.
I guess the problem I have with it, and again, not to offend, but if you look back, Christianity is all about one person, Jesus Christ, really. I mean, and if you look at his life and you look at his message and you look what kind of person he was and all these sinful people that he was hanging out with, that message is so skewed from the message of the Christian church today, at least the mainstream Christian church, right?
Right.
So that to me is where I have a big problem with it. You know, and I was having a conversation with my mom one day, and she said, you're one of the best people that I know, which coming from my mom meant a lot to hear that, because we've worked on acceptance, and she said, you're better than most Christians that I know. I'm like, well, thank you. I don't know what she meant by that, but basically, you don't need to be a Christian to be a good person, is what she was saying.
Right.
In her mouth.
Yeah. We have so many people, and I say this on a regular basis, and I've said it last week, but I meant it when I said this. We have so many people who hate, who hate themselves, and who are trying to bring people to Jesus Christ. That to me is I can't put my head around it. That you hate yourself so much that you castigate and you put down other people, but you want to bring people to Jesus Christ, who spoke about love. Greatest commandment is love thy neighbor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have three things I want to sort of say quickly in response to that last question about advocacy and change. First, if anybody ever tries to use the Sodom and Gomorrah story, invite them to turn in their Bible to Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 through 50, which I will read aloud now for us, which says, now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore, I did away with them, as you have seen. That is not what folks might say, in I guess, some of the bigoted religious spaces. But just invite them to turn that and read it aloud from their own version of whatever Bible they're reading, because that's what that says. Anyway, two other things. One is, I think as somebody said a moment ago, in the Christian scriptures, it says in, I think, 1 John, towards the back next to Revelation, that God is love.
Yes.
That's what it says.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what tradition somebody's from. I don't care where they're from or, anything. We all know what love looks like and feels like, from the tiniest little baby to the eldest senior. We all know what that feels like. And so if God is love, every time we engage in love and experience love and show love, we are participating in the essence of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to hold that, because that is universal. Love is universal.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I think this goes along with what Aaron, I think you were saying, is that when we learn to love ourselves, I'll just speak for myself. When I was able to love myself more and accept this part of my own sexuality and embrace it even, it changed what I needed from church. I didn't need validation anymore, because I had clarity about that, me with me. And so going to church is a different experience. It's like seeking community, seeking opportunities to volunteer, looking for good music to be a part of, wanting to hear an inspirational word, not I need you to tell me that I'm okay. And I think that is so important for all of us, regardless of our tradition or whether we go to church or not, that we got to make peace with our own selves.
Yeah.
And to embrace that shadow side of ourselves. Into the shadow goes all the things that we're ashamed of. Yeah. And that's still a part of us, and that we got to embrace that part of ourselves. And so that's what, and I think every time any of us accepts and embraces all parts of ourselves, it immediately radiates to the people around us, and it gives permission for others around us to do the same thing.
Yes.
And so I think that is what that has been such a powerful impact on me, those that have found that liberation before I did, and then shared it with me. And so that's something that has been really powerful for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And I wrote down that it's Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50. Is that right? We need to put that up on the screen, Lamont.
Yeah, because they love throwing that Sodom and Gomorrah in your face. And I'm like, did you even read it? Like, are we reading the same thing? Like,
right.
Yeah.
It was glossed right on over rape, but
like rape is okay. Like literally.
Rape is great. Not really. Don't.
No, I guess I'm like, are we reading the same thing? Like, you were literally going to give up the women to be raped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because women are seen as less than, right? Right? That
and
stepping on toes. I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And not only are women seen as less than, so are gay people. seen
yeah.
as less than.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about the control.
Yeah. There's so many instances in the Bible where women are used as property, where like if the husband dies, then she has to marry the brother. If she gets raped, she has to marry the rapist. Like you can't touch her if she's on her cycle. She has to go outside of the community. Like there is like.
Are you talking about Alabama?
No, I'm talking. I am talking about what it is written in the Bible.
Oh, the Bible. Oh, I thought that was the law in Alabama now. In Iowa.
I love it.
It might be, depending on who the governor is. I don't know.
Okay.
K. Ivy. That's her name. K. Ivy.
Sure. You guys, it's been a lot of fun, a little triggering probably for some of us, but really appreciate you guys opening up this evening, being vulnerable, sharing your experiences, and I hope our viewers have been able to take something away from this today.
And we had some really rich comments. We didn't get a chance to highlight all of them, but some really good stuff that folks put in the chat. So thank you for your participation in this important conversation.
Yeah, and if you all like these conversations, make sure you are subscribed to the Foreplay podcast on YouTube. Like literally, if you are watching, go over to YouTube, like the video, share the video, so that we can continue to do things like this and have different conversations. If you all don't like, share, comment, then the four of us can just have a conversation. But no, we really want you all to make sure you support the channel.
Yeah. Good night.
All right, everybody have a good night. Great job, Jeremiah, tonight.
Yeah, thanks again, Jeremiah.
Good job as usual, Jeremiah.